What's up, Closer fam? Let's jump right back into the story with a quick recap. When we last left off, the Hero Course students of UA High School underwent an uninterrupted training camp and then moved on to train for their ultimate moves for the rest of the summer, as well as moving into the Heights Alliance dorm system. Stain and Gran Torino began tracking the new villain Stendhal and the motions of the League of Villains, but it seems like the two may be one and the same, and we return to this story now. The day of the provisional license exams had finally come, and Deku and his classmates were loading up on their buses to go to the testing area. Over the summer, classes 1A and 1B would have gotten to know each other a lot better, and Sei and Monoma have developed a really friendly rivalry. Monoma still doesn't like 1A for their supposed superiority and fame, but it's much more toned down by now. Everyone is pretty much friends between classes, and know that without each other, neither class would have gotten as strong as they had throughout the summer if they didn't have each other. All Might isn't going to be traveling to the prison to interrogate All For One in this timeline, since All For One has not been captured yet. So in this timeline, All Might actually could attend the exams with Deku in Class 1A as well as the Eraserhead. He wouldn't be going mainly for Deku, but support all of his students. Remember, he's been helping them with all their special moves for the entire summer, so I can imagine All Might getting really close to all of his students at this point. Oh, also keep in mind that I've never actually read the manga chapters for the exam arc at the time of recording, so I'm not sure if it was explained, but I've always found it a little strange that no other UA teacher other than Aizawa or Vlad King for the Class 1B students attended the exams. In fact, I was under the impression that Midnight and Ectoplasm and those other guys were actually teachers just for Class 1A, and that Class 1B had different teachers, but they could all be teaching the same subjects, just different from class to class. I'm not 100% sure on that. My best guess on this subject is that if you're not a homeroom teacher, it's considered showing favoritism to show up to someone else's exams. In which case, All Might is breaking a taboo, but it's All Might, he breaks a lot of rules. And as they had promised Deku, Gran Torino and Stain would also be in attendance as well. I would also like to argue that in this timeline, Endeavor would have come to the exams if Todoroki had told him. In this timeline, he and Todoroki finished the internship training, and Endeavor may be a bit fond of Bakugo in this timeline since he was also there for that training, and Endeavor may see a bit of himself inside the younger kid. That said, if this is the case, Todoroki wouldn't tell him where the exams are, and in an act of solidarity, Bakugo would just tell Endeavor to piss off. I mostly just find the idea really funny. Just like in canon, the students would arrive to orientation, and this would all start to go the same, though in this timeline, maybe Deku and the others aren't that shooken up by the appearance of the Shiketsu High student Inasa. I wouldn't call them truly intimidated, but it kinda seems like he might have at least rattled Deku's cage. In this timeline, that's just not really gonna happen. But Eraserhead would still use this as a moment to give a wake-up call for his class, and after this, I imagine they would go to the orientation, and that Miss Joke, Eraserhead, All Might, Stain, and Gran Torino would all sit together to watch the exams, much to Aizawa's chagrin. But I actually feel like Aizawa and Stain could get along pretty well when Stain wasn't in Fanatic mode. The first round of the exams will be the exact same game played in canon with the balls and the targets, and the students are placed into the area for the game to begin. But in this timeline, as soon as Bakugo even takes a step to walk off, Deku grabs his shoulder and gently asks him to stay with the group. The two would inevitably begin to argue about this because remember, Deku is a bit more confident and assertive in this timeline, and Bakugo is Bakugo. That said, they both have gained a bit of respect for each other, not where they are now in the current story, but a bit more than they had when the story began at least. During their shouting match, Todoroki begins to walk off, but Deku also stops him and begins to explain how stupid splitting up would be in this type of game. He also explains that Kirishima was likely going to follow Bakugo anyway, so he may as well just stay with the group. Besides, it was possible for them to all pass extremely quickly, which gets Bakugo's attention at the very least, and he wants to hear him out. Deku then reveals his thought process and that he's already thought about the concept of all the schools attacking UA since they'd have the most info on them and not a lot on the other schools. Remember, the UA Sports Festival is broadcasted, and most of them have gone all out, so most of these schools will know how to use their powers. Granted, they have gotten extremely stronger since the Sports Festival, but this is still a very big risk to their winning. However, this also gave them the element of surprise. Nobody knew how much stronger they were, and since a lot of these students here, or second years, they were already underestimating them. This is surprisingly enough to convince Bakugo to stay, but he does declare that he will be the first one to pass out of all of Class 1A, and Todoroki will also be staying, mostly just because he thinks that Deku's thinking was very sound and logical. Now, instead of coming up with some convoluted class 1A combo move, I think it's enough to say that a lot of what the students did in canon to pass will happen here, but as a team maneuver. Todoroki could make a huge ice wall for defense, or freeze the feet of those approaching them. Mineta could make a minefield of his pop-off balls. Koda could still summon birds to swarm around and distract everybody from even being able to make their throws. There's a lot you can do right here. And as for defending from the oncoming balls, well, Deku now has 12% of 1 for all activated when he uses 1 for all full cowling. So any real attack he uses will cause enough wind pressure to shoot those all back, and any stragglers could be cut off by Bakugo. You also have Mina, who has really developed her Acid Veil technique to be really powerful, so there's a lot of defense and attack potential in this team. So the results from whatever this combo move, and if you guys have any ideas for one, definitely post them down in the comment section below. I'll definitely read them and enjoy reading them. But whatever happens, you get the result of shooting fish in a barrel. So all of Class 1A wins really easily and really fast, almost like Inasa does. So right off the bat, there are a few implications to this scenario. Number 1, it's possible that some of the students in Miss Joke's class could have been eliminated during this, but I'll allow all of them to pass in this timeline, simply due to having their names known and not being random background characters to fail this part of the exam. Number 2, Seiji Shishikura, the guy with the quirk called Meatball, would also be able to pass. He reveals that his original goal of the exam was to thin the herd, so to speak, but remember, his original inspiration for that sentiment was the rhetoric of Stain after he was defeated in Hosu City. And Stendhal has been, doing his own rhetoric, yes, but much later in the timeline, so he may not have come into contact with those ideas just yet. And secondly, I believe if he didn't run into Bakugo's group, then he would have been satisfied at some point with how many people he'd taken out of the running and would go and decide to pass. I'm also mentioning this a bit late, but since Toga hasn't joined the League of Villains yet, the Kami that is participating in the exams right now is the real Kami. Yes, Stendhal has joined the league, but this is a very recent development, so Dabi, Spinner, and Toga have not heard of it yet and have not joined yet. So the students of 1A pass with flying colors around the same time that Inasa does and begin to gather in the waiting area for the next round of the exams. This time is spent with Deku and Bakugo arguing about whose strategy was better during that, with Todoroki quietly pointing out the flaws in his and Bakugo's original idea and getting chewed out by the blonde. But suddenly, the sounds of chaos and fighting outside due to the exams begin to change to be much more frightful. Everyone looks to the TV that displayed the field, but the image on the screen wasn't any type of exam. You could very clearly see that Kurogiri's warp gates were seen as a man dressed like a magician threw out very small marbles that began to expand into no-moves and low-level villains. As soon as this happened, an announcement came over the intercom system telling the students to evacuate the area as soon as possible. The few heroes on the scene began to jump into action, and the exam officials began to call in for backup. But of course, as soon as they see the first signs of trouble, Deku, Bakugo, and Todoroki rush in feeling the need to help out. Ida calls for them to return, but soon the whole class is running alongside them, with those of Shiketsu High and Miss Joke's class also running behind them. Once outside, the scene truly looks like a nightmare. There were bodies all over the ground. No one could tell whether the students had died or were just injured, but the reaction from most of them was shock and disgust. After some people had puked and even cried, the immediate danger of the situation rears its head as one of the no-moves sets his sight on the students. Snarling in anger and wanting something to take it out on, Deku and Bakugo rocket forward and deliver a flying knee and an explosion to its chest respectively that literally causes the beast to burst into a mud-like substance before crumbling away into the same substance. None of the students understand this, but the League of Villain member Twice has made a few copies of every one of their Nomu at their disposal to better overwhelm the heroes and the students, along with the fodder villains and thugs they brought along with them. Remember that these are white Nomu, which were already weaker than the original black Nomu, and are much less durable but still deadly. And since Twice has made copies of them, each copy will be less and less durable than the last. Also remember that since they had not used a Nomu for a pretty long time, since the USJ attack in fact, at the very least the League has 4 Nomu at the moment. But I'd like to say that at this point, for the sole purpose of this attack, the League has generated 10 weaker Nomu in total. Deku was just as scared as everyone else, but tells them that this was the reality of their dream. They had to prioritize saving people as much as they could. For those who weren't in UA, it was possible that this was their first time dealing with true dangerous combat situations. If this were the case, then it truly was their duty to get everyone they could out of danger. Everyone agrees to this sentiment, even those who are not in Class 1A. Even Bakugo gives a very curt nod and moves out to begin saving people. But then a giant purple cloud of poison begins to spread around the field, and Yaoyorozu this time advises everyone to back up and begins creating gas masks. Inasa steps forward, seeing a chance to show his passion, and begins using his powers to whip up the miasma into a funnel and redirect it so it couldn't harm anyone. This action gets all the eyes of everyone in the area onto the students. The plan to evacuate people was still on, and the students begin trying to do so, while All Might destroys a Nomu that was in front of him and rushes over to everyone demanding that the students get out of here while depositing a few injured people into their hands. As this was a non-negotiable order from his teacher, Deku is just about to do so, but Todoroki steps in and explains that they should also be protecting people. Just then, All Might hears a huge shockwave and turns around just in time to see a big man with huge muscles outside his body flying at him. He swivels and the two clash, sending huge blasts of wind and shockwaves all around and spreading out the students. Meanwhile, in the distance, it was possible to see the other heroes fighting against the actual named villains. Eraserhead had erased the quirk of a person with big lips and sunglasses, but the real danger was the huge magnet that they were swinging around with high proficiency. Gran Torino and Stain were trying to dodge and weave through the massive blades and attack their creator, a man in a straitjacket, but it was proving very hard. And Miss Joke was trying to make a person with a gas mask laugh, but their gun was making it a bit too hard for her to get in close. And though no one had seen him arrive, Gang Orca mysteriously appeared and began to fight off villains along with his men. Unfortunately, Deku chooses now to freeze up. If All Might had ordered him to retreat, then he had to, but he couldn't abandon people in need. This locks him into place as he tries to think of something that would be a compromise between the two outcomes. Knowing that Deku would waste time trying to think about something, Bakugo speaks up after telling All Might to jump. The hero looks behind him just in time to see a massive blast from one of Bakugo's gauntlets rushing at him. He was still locked into a contest of strength between he and Muscular, but thinking quick, he grabs his hands and rolls on his back before flipping and kicking Muscular into the blast, knocking him away and singeing him. That probably wasn't going to put him down for good, but he'd be out of the way for a good amount of time at least. You idiots! Get a move on! Four Eyes, you're quick! Get these losers who can't fight out of here! Baldy, you got wind powers, right? Go beat the poison dude. Kirishima, the guy with the blades can't hurt you. Go help that loser Stain. You Shuketsu losers are strong, right? Then how about you show us and fight these Nomu? And the rest of you background characters, stay out of my way or I'll kill you. Deku, get your head out of your ass. Come on, Icy Hot, I'm gonna find the boss villain. All Might and Deku were both pretty shocked by the orders, but the number one had to do what he could to save as many people as possible, and so did Deku, so he seconds what Bakugo had just said to everyone. From here on out, the inspiring heroes did what they could to evacuate everyone, while taking out the Nomus around them. A lot of them were a bit weaker, but it was still hard to take them out than Deku and Bakugo had made it seem with their combined attack. This was more of a feat of Deku and Bakugo's current strength than a measure of the quality of these clone Nomu. Pretty quickly, the tides of battle began to turn. Magnum was finally captured by Eraserhead, causing the pro hero to be able to take his eyes off her and deactivate the quirk of Moonfish, who after being suspended in the air, is knocked out of it by Gran Torino and Stain using a combined attack. Muscular's power was nearly equal to All Might's, but he had nowhere near the same skill at using it. Where he mostly went for wild swings and slams, All Might was easily able to counter all these attacks. He also reveled at the prospect of not having to be gentle with the man, but he wasn't going down just yet. Unfortunately for Muscular, Bakugo currently viewed him as the biggest, baddest villain on the field, and he was definitely going to be the one to take him down. Muscular tries to pounce on All Might once again, but before he can make contact, he is blasted away by Todoroki's fire and pushing him all the way back. With Muscular unable to see and still trying to fight the flames, Kirishima hardens his body to the max, and Bakugo grabs him by the collar before spinning and throwing him directly at him. With the red missile heading straight towards his head, Muscular has his bell rung and the knees go weak. But Bakugo's savage onslaught does not end here. He explodes forward and lands the most powerful horse impact he had ever used. One so strong the thunderclap from the shockwaves could be heard from miles away. Muscular is blown back and embedded into the walls of the stadium, knocked completely out cold. Seeing this, Kurogiri's warp gate opens another time, releasing two more figures, Tomura Shigaraki and Stendhal. Remember Shigaraki, Midoriya is to be left unharmed. He will be the savior of this society. Shigaraki just scoffs and tells his associate to get on with it. At this, Stendhal snarls and stomps his foot down, unleashing the strongest bloodlust binding he could. Because the area was already surrounded in fear and chaos, it was extremely effective and knocked out most people. Thankfully, the majority of the pros, as well as Deku, Todoroki, Kirishima, Inasa, and Bakugo, were still awake. Seeing his newly minted arch nemesis reappear, Stain instantly engaged in combat with Stendhal. All Might takes this opportunity to rush over to the students and tells them this time he really meant it. Get out of here. Grab everyone they could and just go. He then attempts to go after Shigaraki, only for the man to snap and for the rest of the Nomu, the clones, and the real ones to begin to swarm the number one hero. Deku and the others begin to feverishly try to get their allies out of the area, and thankfully with Inasa's quirk, that is a simple task by just making a massive wind to push everyone out of the area. During the escape, Deku just has a bad feeling and turns around to see that Shigaraki is putting its hands on some of the injured still on the ground. He could hear All Might's pain howls as he witnessed the deaths, and it just happened. He rushed at Shigaraki with everything he had, getting out of Inasa's wind. Just before he could reach him, Shigaraki ducked with ample time to spare. He's even able to reach out and rub Deku's arm, causing most of his gloves and part of his skin to crumble away. Deku roars in pain and anger at Shigaraki for being a monster, and the villain grunts that he was going to enjoy reducing him to dust. Stendhal be damned. Shigaraki's speed and reflexes were absolutely insane, even compared to Deku with full cowling, and his quirk made that all the more dangerous. Because Deku understood his quirk, it kept from being way too reckless, but he was able to glance the odd blow or two and avoid the man's attacks and response. But slowly, Shigaraki began to speed up, as if this battle was making him stronger, like some type of training. Deku finally gets desperate enough to try a dirty trick. He jumps back to gain some distance, and sees Shigaraki rush at him. Finally, Stendhal takes notice of their scuffle and roars at Shigaraki to stop at the same time that Stain does, both breaking from their battle to hopefully save their student. Meanwhile, All Might is still destroying Nomu after Nomu, but the Nomu know to attack his weak spot, and so he is being slowed down and stopped in his tracks. Behind his back, Deku begins to roll his glove up over his hand, giving it a buffer. He then gets his footing to jump back at Shigaraki as he was still rushing him, allowing them to clash. He rears his fist back and unleashes a smash to the villain. Shigaraki grins and sees this coming. He grabs Deku's punch in mid-air, actually being able to stop it even with the force behind it. Deku's glove quickly begins to crumble away before the skin under his hand does the same. By this point, Deku's plan truly activates, and he pulls his other hand and grabs Shigaraki's other wrist. The pain was unbearable, but he squeezed down on the wrist as hard as he could, making it break. Deku then rears his head back as far as he could and rams the top of his skull directly into Shigaraki's face, making the force go through the hand that covers it and directly into the other man's skull. Still pushing through the pain, he uses the rest of his momentum to flip over the larger man's body and throw him with the rest of the strength he has before succumbing to the pain and dropping to one knee. He then pants out, bloody style, Brooklyn Smash. Shigaraki actually suffers a good few injuries from this attack, but Deku wasn't going to be getting back up to attack him anymore anytime soon. Right now, it's a stalemate. So far, the tides of battle had changed too much in the favor of the heroes, and somebody had definitely noticed. One last Kurogiri warp gate opens, and a huge man in a suit walks through. He orders his forces to retreat. They dealt a heavy blow to the heroes, and the students of this twisted hero society. All Might and Gran Torino freeze for only a second, but the younger hero sees red. By now, the Nomu were defeated, but he was so tired and haggard that he couldn't attack as straightforwardly as he wanted to. Using the tendrils of Force Quirk activation, All For One reaches out and begins to save each and every one of the major league of villain members. Moonfish, Muscular, and the other downed villains are soon thrown through a portal and saved. Shigaraki himself, even though he was gravely injured, was begging his master to let him stay and fight by his side, but All For One is relentless and forces him to go through. The only one he does not grab is Stendhal, who is just too far away from the likes of the battle as he still clashes with Stain. The newly minted villain had to kill Stain and stop his influence on the world, and the hero was truly thinking about slipping into his old mindset to take out this murderer. All Might finally summons up enough stamina to attempt a rush at All For One, but the villain easily catches his attack, though it is enough to create a huge shockwave that levels the field of battle. All Might is far beyond his limit, and Gran Torino knows this as he flies in to help distract the boss villain. Sadly, his long-range attacks are keeping the retired hero away. Eraserhead is also blown back during the first shockwave, but he is conscious at the very least and cradling the injured Miss Joke. The problem is, he's reached his limit using his quirk and can barely keep his eyes open. He also reasons that he needs to keep a certain distance away from All For One as to not have his quirk stolen. If he could just wait long enough, he could get some stamina back and take away the villain's power for one final hit. He tells Joke to be his eyes and ears while he waits for that moment and the hero who would capitalize on it. All For One and All Might get into a very similar dialogue about whether or not All For One will kill All Might, and All For One revealing who Shigaraki really is, putting All Might in a similar mindset of distress. Stain and Stendhal had been jostled by the shockwave, but hadn't stopped their fighting. This was fueled by more than just the obligation of heroes and villains to be pitted against each other. This was hate. Stendhal even reveals that this was his body now. He'd had All For One help him in suppressing the consciousness of Swordkill, the actual owner of the body that Stendhal was hijacking. Stain was furious. He'd already felt like all the blood that Stendhal has built was on his hands, and this was just more to coat it. The two clash blades one final time, and Stain thinks about how Deku had just done that broken smash attack, and rears his own head back before slamming it into his opponent's face and cracking Stendhal's mask inwards, shattering the material into his face and eyes, just as the Vigilante had done to him once before. This forces some of Stendhal's blood to spurt out, and Stain uses his quirk to paralyze him with it. He then grabs his nicked and chipped up sword, and is just about to end the villain's life, when a hand is placed on his shoulder. Deku was holding him back and begging Stain, even in his heavily injured state, "Don't go back, Stain. Don't go back. You're a hero now." Stain considers this for only a moment, and then rams the hilt of his sword into Stendhal's temple, knocking him out. All Might stands to his feet, summoning all the power he still has left in his body, and Miss Joke tells Aizawa that All Might and All For One are going to clash, and tells him to open his eyes and erase All For One's quirk. Just like in the original, All Might is about to sacrifice one of his arms to bait All For One, but before the arm can be hit and injured, All For One's power is cut off, reverting his arm to be that of a normal one. This allows All Might to hit his smash that is finally able to put the number one villain down and out of commission without sacrificing the last few embers of One For All. By this time, the pro heroes, the authorities, and even some of Class 1A that had realized Deku had gone back were arriving and providing help to whoever who needed it. In the aftermath of the battle, of the 1,500 plus students attending the licensing exams, 27% of them walked away with some type of severe injury, and over 40% of the students would die in the attack. Of that remaining 900 survivors, over half of them would go on to quit their hero course studies. The only true bright side of this whole tragedy was the capture of the villains, All For One and Stendhal. But this news would reveal that Stendhal had joined the League of Villains, causing 3 of his most fanatical followers to seek out the broker, Garan, to join the League and carry out Stendhal's will even further. After speaking about it with Gran Torino and telling him that he can bare maintain his muscle form for much longer than a few minutes, the retired hero finally tells All Might that he only has one real solution. And not just that, if he did, he could do his duty and focus on raising Deku and the other students of Class 1A. And so, All Might would actually call a press conference and come out in his muscle form before reverting to his true form. He explains that in his last battle, he was injured past the point of full recovery and will be retiring as of immediately. But he has a message to the students of hero schools, to the Reed families, and again, to the villains that had slithered off. There was no reason to lose hope. Those lives that were lost in the attack would not die in vain. Those heroes that decided to move forward, even with that tragedy weighing on their hearts, would get their wake-up calls. This wasn't a game. Heroes put their lives on the line every day and hold the lives of civilians in their hands. Most heroes don't figure this out until they become pros already, or were damn near close. But what the villains have done was to create a generation of heroes that would know this from the get-go. They would train harder, study more, and attempt to rescue people with everything they had. They've sown the seeds of their own destruction. All Might knew this was a bittersweet sentiment, but he wanted the families and students who had given up to realize those that kept moving forward would do everything in their power to make sure that this never happened again. As a result of All Might's words, it is later decided that all students to pass the first round of the exam would be awarded their Provisional Hero license. Later on, All Might and Stain would actually go to Tartarus prison and speak to their arch nemesis. The conversation between the former two is the same as in canon, but Stain and Stendhal have an extremely heated argument, ending with Stain vowing to find a way to get Swordkill his body back and end Stendhal's scourge on the world. Stendhal was only right about one thing: Izuku Midoriya would be the savior of this society, and he'd make damn well sure that Izuku Midoriya grew up to be an even better hero than All Might himself, and change the culture of heroes the right way. And finally, at UA High School, Eraserhead introduces his class to the Big Three. But coming off the situation they just went through, Togata does not challenge anyone to a sparring match, at least not on the same day. And if he does, he really only gets to fight those who are truly up to fighting him. But now, with all 20 students having their provisional licenses and all inspired to get stronger after the supposed war, they are all going to seek out work studies. But that plus Ultra fans will all be leaving this timeline off for right now. First off, massive shout out to What If Universe for reviewing the script and giving feedback. He is linked in the description below. He's an awesome guy, so please go and show him some love. I also decided to try a new editing style because I knew this video was going to be kind of long and I didn't want it to be too intricate or too complex, so I could get it out in a pretty reasonable amount of time. So the video may be edited a bit differently to what you're kind of used to, but it was just me trying something different. I'm not sure I'll keep this style or not. This might just be for this type of video. You guys let me know what you liked. Also, last time I gave you guys a few polls to collect some data about what rate My Hero scenarios should go out at, and I've decided to go at the pace of the anime's production because the majority of you guys are anime only, and I strongly feel that My Hero Academia is a story that deserves to not be spoiled. Though I do think I will hold that same poll in a little while again just to get some more data and see if maybe by having my stories come at a slower pace for those of you who aren't reading the manga, more of you will begin to pick up the manga more and more, and we might be able to switch this over to me going to the pace of the manga. Also, I was looking at my analytics and I've noticed that over 60% of you guys are not subscribed. What in the world? What are you doing? You guys obviously enjoy the content, so go ahead and subscribe and join the Plus Ultra fam. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe as well, and definitely hit the notification bell. And as always, a massive shout out to the patrons. In the hero tier, we have Lone Wolf McQuaid, Zaya Returns, and Treb. In Shinobi tier, we have Pizza 15X. In Z Warrior tier, we have Knuckles OX. And in the Beyond tier, we have Robert Smith and Xander Tribdy. These guys go Plus Ultra to support the channel directly, and with all the coming changes to YouTube, that means a ton, because there's a ton of work put into these videos that the platform just does not appreciate, that you guys obviously do. Finally, be sure to take care of yourselves, and as always, go beyond Plus Ultra. See you guys next time. My Bakugo kind of sounds like Kuwabara. Urameshi! Deku!